Hey everyone, this is George Soto and you're watching Startups Unedited. Good morning everyone, this is George Soto with Soto Ventures and you're watching Startups Unedited. This morning I'm with Pascal Finette. Pascal, did I pronounce it properly again?
It was very close to perfect. Very close to
Okay.
perfect.
Finette?
Finette. It's
Finette, perfect.
yeah, it's French and I'm German, and I lived in the UK, so all over Europe.
So you're the best of all worlds there. But by the way, I love Europe. I spent some time in Europe this last year, and it was just a really incredible opportunity. My mother's family is originally from Spain, and of course, my dad is Cuban, descendants of Italy and Spain, and so I just have a soft spot for Europe. I always say that that's my next destination.
You should definitely go. Barcelona or Berlin.
Absolutely, I hear fantastic things about Berlin. So
Oh yeah.
the ecosystem there I hear is just exploding for startups. So really excited about that. Well, Pascal, if you don't mind just kind of giving us a little background on your professional background and when did you really realize you were an entrepreneur? You started, first of all, your resume is fantastic. You've started SaaS companies before SaaS was even thought of. You worked at fantastic companies like Mozilla, who, for everyone who's unaware, are the creators of Firefox, the browser, which I think really revolutionized the browser experience, and now are heading up the Singularity University Lab. Is that accurate?
That is absolutely correct. Yes. Yeah.
Fantastic.
So as you said, I think my background really is anchored in entrepreneurship. So I started my first company out of college when I was 19, during the crazy days of the first dot-com boom, by the way. So I I have never seen anything like that, and I probably will never see anything like that ever again, where I could raise $2.5 million basically on a two-page business plan as a single founder. Um, Pretty crazy, pretty stupid, make no mistake. So I did a bunch of companies, had the great fortune of working at some of the more interesting tech companies. So I worked at eBay in the very early days. As you mentioned, Mozilla, spent some time at Google, co-founded a venture firm, which we brought to London. And yeah, now at Singularity University, where I head up our innovation lab.
Now, I know you've actually launched quite a few innovation labs at a variety of companies. What's kind of the thought process there for these organizations when they think about, hey, we need to actually create an innovation team within our larger organization? Is it that they are looking at it from an investment perspective, or more a just being able to create teams that tend to be smaller and more agile for more the innovation product side?
Yeah, so in my case, it was always the latter. So I know that very large companies do the former, so they really build these innovation labs to come up with new ideas, which they then can spin up and invest into. In my case, so I did this innovation work here at Singularity University, at Mozilla, and to a certain extent at eBay. It was really about like taking a small team, basically of lunatics, like crazy people, and put them at the edge, right? Like the idea is like free them from the shackles of the actual organization and the money making of the organization, which is all good and healthy and important, and let them explore what's happening at the fringes. So for me, for someone with my personality, which is basically ADD driven, it's the perfect spot.
Well, amen on that. I mean, I'm a maniac, lunatic, and I've been hearing that my whole life, and I do have ADD, I think, so I completely get it. Just I wanted to focus for a second, Pascal, on singularity. Like, I mean, I'm super excited about the concept. It's just very logical for me. What is singularity? And I know this is a broad question and hard to answer in
Sure.
2 minutes. But what's the impact on planet Earth that singularity will have and is happening today?
Yeah, sure. So there's different definitions of what the singularity, quote unquote, actually is. But at the very basic premise is understanding that computers get faster and faster all the time and better, right? Which the underlying driver for that is Moore's law, which said that basically computers get twice as fast and half as expensive every 2 years. You can actually extrapolate the point in time when you have a computer which has the compute power of a human brain, which happens in the next 15 years. So in 15 years, someone will build a computer which is basically as smart as a human. That doesn't mean that it needs necessarily is conscious, but it has the smarts, right? So the point is that sometime in this time frame, probably slightly beyond that, but sometime in this time frame, you will have machines which become or can become representations of us. And you see this a little bit today with like Siri and Cortana and Google Now, where you start to have this like interaction with a computer, which is a little bit more like an intelligence. And the singularity really is the moment when you have like a full intelligence basically in a compute device. And to your question about like, what does this mean for humanity? Many things. I think it will dramatically change the way we live our lives. So imagine the phone in your pocket is not just a fairly dumb Siri, which can't do a lot today, but becomes literally like a little mini version of yourself, but connected to all the knowledge and services in the world. So you can have a really meaningful conversation with an artificial intelligence and have that AI do things for you. So it will very dramatically change the way we perceive the world.
I thought a lot about, the will machines take over and what does that even mean? I don't, you look at the Terminator, story and all these silliness that people talk about, and it's always so negative. And, I don't necessarily buy that. I mean, we'll see, right? But, there is one component of processing data and being able to understand data and coming up with, responses or answers to questions or formulas, etc., or problems, and then you talk about like what it is to be human, and that that whole question. But when we talk about what it is to be alive and human and conscious, I don't know if you're able to answer this, but I just figured I'd throw it out there. Are we able to actually replicate consciousness versus what our brain is doing, receiving all this stimulus? Like you and I are sitting here and I'm hearing this stuff, seeing this stuff, and then actually processing it. And then there's this entity that a lot of religions and philosophies have talked about for centuries, and it's this consciousness that's just aware. Have we been able to get there? I mean, is that something that can be programmed or that a machine could do?
Right. I think it's a fantastic question, by the way. So my personal view, there's a gazillion different views on this, right? So my personal view is, so first of all, we don't know a lot about consciousness, quote unquote. We also, just to be clear, we know very little about how, for example, our brain even works. So this is all in the very beginning stages of research. I believe the interesting question is actually not, will computers be conscious like humans? But the much more interesting question is, when computers become self-aware, how will that actually look like? Because it will look different. Because ultimately, their quote-unquote brain is silicon, right? It's a different type of material. It's a different way of interacting than what we have in our skulls, right? A colleague of mine has this amazing picture, and he talks about this, which is, imagine you've got a picture which in the picture you've got a big ant. So you just see the ant basically, and there's a tip of the finger, and you can only see the tip of the finger, and the ant has its little like antennas, like tilted upwards towards that finger. And the point being that for the ant can see the finger. It has no concept of what the rest of that human body is, which belongs to that finger, right? Because it can only experience the little finger. When we get AI, quote unquote conscious AI, we might very well be the ant. So we see this little thing, but this really big body behind it is actually it's incomprehensible for us because it's so different. Interesting times.
Interesting times. I know a lot of people have been talking about this topic for a while. For some reason, so many of us are scared, which I get, right? I get the perspectives of what
totally
singularity means, right? Or could mean, totally. But I'm actually quite excited about it. I think if there's any opportunity to live longer and be able to replace the the organs and some of the processes internally that are happening biologically with some sort of intelligent machine, I mean, hey, why not, right? I wanted to talk a second about Singularity University. And I've been monitoring Singularity for a while now. As I mentioned, Chris Duggan, the CEO and founder over at BetterWorks, is involved with the organization. I know your part is, I mean, really exciting. What is Singularity University focused on now, and who should be applying, whether it's to the overall university or to your particular lab?
Totally. So we are both an educational institution as well as an institution which facilitates building stuff. And we're mission driven. So our mission is to inspire, educate, empower leaders to apply exponential technology. So these are these advanced technologies we just talked about, like AI, synthetic biology, robotics, nanotech, new energy systems, etc., to address humanity's grand challenges. And this is important, right? So we're really focusing on how do we leverage the latest in technology and not only teach people to understand those and teach people to understand what the impact of those will be, but also the idea of how do you tackle the biggest problems in the world with that? Because there's, a gazillion problems which need to be addressed. And I believe everyone here at Singularity University is just sick and tired of your next social media photo sharing app. Nothing against it, but it's like we have bigger problems, bigger fish to fry. So to your question, who should apply and who should come, a couple of answers are probably relevant for the viewers of your podcast. We run a program in the summer, which is a 10-week program, which is probably one of the best education programs I know in the world. And it's fully sponsored. So typically would be a $30,000 fare, but we fully sponsor it. We bring the smartest kids from the world together and teach them, and then also inspire them to build companies to solve these big problems. That's number one. The second is, if you work on a startup which is in this space, so you're like leveraging really interesting technology, tackling big problems, we have a series of programs, including a startup accelerator and a venture fund to support you. So in those cases also, by all means, like here's your home to apply.
Amen. I love it. I really love it. And, I haven't been in the game, in the startup world and technology world as long as you have, but, over my 14 years, I have been, in a place where I become fatigued with hearing another MySpace for, whatever thing, or Dropbox for, this type of file or something, right? It's like, even I, right, like, who have spent a lot of time trying to build software companies, and part of, building and growing software companies, I always have these moments where I sit there and I go, what are we really doing here? Like, we're building some ad tech thing or some like social CRM thing. Like, who really cares? Like, how does this actually help the world? And I think a lot of us struggle with that. So I really love your mission. Speaking of entrepreneurs, how can we out there, us like wild maniac entrepreneurs who, love innovating, love creating things, love using building blocks to build castles, how do we actually impact this singularity movement, and this could be anything from specific opportunities or I hate to say pain points, but like the world's pain points, how can we impact it in a positive way?
Totally. So one thing I always tell our entrepreneurs is really start from first of all, start from a real problem statement. So don't build technology like, this very well. Like very often, like you see technology built for the sake of technology. It's like, hey, I built this weird little thing, and like now let's find out if there's a problem for it. That's all fine. It just doesn't solve a real problem. So develop real empathy. Really figure out like what problem spaces look like. A really good primer in this is this whole design thinking movement, which comes out of Stanford's D School. Which you can study for free online, etc. So I think that's a really good starting point to like understand the problem. Once you have your problem, like the one thing I always tell people is ask yourself, what does it take to make the problem go away? Like one of my big pet peeves is that there's a lot of people solving interesting problems, and yet they're still thinking too small. Like they're still thinking like we're making a little dent, like your typical, like when you hear people pitch, they always have this like, it's $1 billion market and we will take 2% of that market or something, right? It's like, no, for Christ's sake, like take 100% of the market, make the problem go away, right? So with those two pieces, I believe you can actually find and build very meaningful, like you find interesting problems, build meaningful companies.
You know, you touched on something here that I think is really interesting, and this is something I've observed, something I've done, and we'll probably do just based on, you know, the things that happen when you're part of a founding team or trying to build a business, you know, where maybe it's because at times we focus on we first of all overthink things a little bit. I think over plan sometimes, and then we, you know, when you're talking about specifically or intentionally saying, hey, we're going to actually target 2% of the market, like for me that doesn't sound like the type of business that is trying to impact the world in a way that we're talking about here from a, you know, based on the philosophies and the mission of Singularity University, you know, within this context, of course. Like it sounds more like, hey, I'm trying to make a little money and try to get my, you know, take the economics out of this opportunity, and, you know, and that's it, right? And so, you know, I struggle with that. In your opinion, what's the, like, how do you balance, hey, the balance between, hey, I want to make some money and run a successful business that's economically intelligent, versus how do we build something that really, truly impacts the world in a positive way? Like, I find that sometimes it's hard, and you see these founders who maybe sit on, you know, one side of that equation and not on the other. And then it's like, how do we actually really build an organization? Do you have any tips for founders out there around how to balance this? How do I build something that helps humanity, that helps the kids who are dying in Africa right now as we speak, right? And you look at all these diseases and viruses. I mean, there's just a plethora of things that we can be focused on. How do we balance that with, hey, we need to make money and we need financial freedom?
Totally. So let me be clear. It's not easy, right? Like generally building a company is not easy. That's the first step, right? So I think it's the first question I believe you want to ask yourself is like, what do you actually want to build? So there's nothing wrong with like people going out and saying, hey, I want to build this little, like whatever, like little social tool or like a little consulting agency, and I want to just make some money and I'm happy with that. By all means, do it. It's fine. If you have a burning desire to actually pick a problem and solve for that, what you describe is this, like, I call it the dichotomy between the short and the long term. Because you have these long-term goals, these lofty, you know, like let's put a man on the Mars, right? Like Elon Musk's dream. And at the same time, you need to make money in the short term, right? So understanding that this is, you need to, as a founder, you need to hold these two perspectives in your head and keep them balanced is the first step. Once you have that, then you can go into, okay, so if you have a long-term goal, you can look at your short-term decisions, which should support that goal, but also make you money. So you basically, like you in your head, you start to bifurcate between like, here's my long-term goal, here's my short-term thing, which could be, for example, long-term, I want to build something. Short-term, I'm doing some consulting, you know, the bootstrapping, right? Like you do some consulting to get to the long-term goal. The one thing you want to keep in mind though is that even the short-term stuff, even if it makes you money, it needs to support that long-term goal, right? So it's a complicated situation, totally doable. Because the other thing is, Peter Diamandis, one of our co-founders, kind of like has this like throwaway comment, which is actually really smart, which is the biggest problems are the biggest opportunities, right? That's the other thing you need to look at is if you think, for example, like you want to solve, I don't know, let's say clean drinking water. Clean drinking water is 800 million people worldwide, right? Which do not have access to clean drinking water. If you can solve for that problem, like you easily have like tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, actual customers. So there's something in there which is like understanding that a lot of these big problems are also massive, massive markets and market opportunities.
Awesome. Well, Pascal, thank you so much. I want to give your blog some recognition. You have a website and a blog and a podcast. I mean, tons of really fantastic media. I know it's theheretic.org. Is that accurate?
That is correct, yes.
And what's the best social network to reach you on if I want to consume your content or maybe give you a couple shout outs online?
Well, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media, but frankly, so I know that you sold the company to Twitter, so I should probably not say this, but frankly, I'm probably like most active on Facebook. So by all means, like befriend me on Facebook. I'm P Finette on Facebook. You'll find me. I'm a pretty sociable guy, I guess.
And I'll also give the shout. I still have friends and over at Twitter, but I understand. I mean, it's really about a multi-channel approach. But I did want to give your Twitter a shout out because I love the content on Twitter that you post, and it's P Finette. So that's Finette. So that's at P Finette. You're on Twitter, you're on Facebook, you're on just all the social networks. So everyone, you should absolutely follow Pascal and really absorb his wisdom. Pascal, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Have a great day, and I'd love to meet you in person someday.
Awesome. Well, come to the Singularity University campus. I'll gladly host you here at the Crazy. And thank you so much for having me. This was fantastic.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful day, and keep the mission going. We got to change the world, right?
Thank you. Sounds good.
Yeah, and we can finally do it through this program, not through creating a file sharing thing for people in Austin, Texas, or whatever. Nothing against Austin. I love Austin.
Perfect.
All right. Have a great morning.
Perfect. Thank you. Talk
Thank
soon.
you. Ciao.
Bye.